Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am so glad you're here. My name is Julia, and as you can see from the change to my channel title, I am one of the non-binary pals. I got my binder in the mail the other week, which I'm very excited about, even though it's not comfy, but neither are bras, so. It was never my intention to have my full name be the title of my channel permanently, and I was sort of trying to find a good title that would match my, I hesitate to say brand, personality, let's say. Although I won't exclusively be reviewing books by non-binary authors or with non-binary characters, I felt that NB Library set a good precedent for what my channel is about. And hopefully I'll get some new followers or viewers with this video, since I'm filming it for a bit of a different audience. This is a crossover between my fandoms. As you can see, I'm repping my Dimension 20 merch, which is a good segue to talk about the show Dimension 20. For those of you who follow me on YouTube and don't know, Dimension 20 is a actual play D&D show produced by College Humor, and it currently has 3 seasons and 2 mini seasons. The 3 main seasons have the same cast and Dungeon Master, and then the mini seasons have the same Dungeon Master, Brennan Lee Mulligan, but with a different cast of player characters. In the 4th season and the 2nd mini season, they got all 4 of the McElroys to play, along with 2 Dimension 20 cast members, and that's kind of what got me into Dimension 20 with Tiny Heist, that came out in January. I think with many Dimension 20 fans, our jumping off point was the crossover of The Adventure Zone and Dimension 20. After finishing Tiny Heist, which I thought was just freaking fantastic, I was a little hesitant to watch Fantasy High, which is the first full D&D season of Dimension 20, because it's about high school, and I didn't have a great time in high school and don't really enjoy high school stories, but boy was I wrong, because not only is it my favorite show, it's now one of my favorite medias, period. Like, I would rate it over some book series that I really love. But I also wanted to do a kind of crossover to talk about books and book series that I believe are good read-alikes for Dimension 20. So the 3 main series that Dimension 20 has done so far, they're all D&D, but with different characters and in different settings. So the first season, Fantasy High, which I mentioned, is, and these lovely characters here, is my favorite. It follows a group of 6 high schoolers in their first and then second year at the Eggford Adventuring Academy. There are a lot of high school, like John Hughes-y story tropes. Both the cast and the player characters in this show are very diverse in terms of race and sexuality in a really authentic and genuine way. My absolute favorite thing about this show is how supportive all the characters are of each other, which is something that I always look for in media, is when characters like each other. The reason that I love Fantasy High so much is, like, from basically the very beginning, everyone was so, like, loving and friendly to each other and just have chemistry that you could eat with a spoon. So that's enough of a preamble for me to talk about the read-alikes for Fantasy High. First, this one may seem obvious. It was super obvious to me when I started thinking of books to apply to this, but it is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel. The first one is called Six of Crows. The second one is The Crooked Kingdom, or just Crooked Kingdom. That always trips me up. This is a duology, but it is one cohesive story, basically, and like Fantasy High, has a cast of 6 diverse POV characters. Everyone is given an equal amount of weight and importance in the narrative, except for Waylon, one of the main characters, who doesn't have POV until the 2nd book, but he's really wonderful. I think that if you like Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, you would really love Fantasy High. It has the same amount of banter, but everyone is even more supportive of each other. I think what tripped me up initially reading Six of Crows is that not everyone liked each other, but by the end they definitely did, although it takes some of the more prickly characters to get to like each other. Next is Young Avengers by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. This is a team book in the way that a lot of Marvel or DC comic titles are, where there are multiple people working together on a team, and it focuses on all of their strengths and weaknesses and backstories. This team consists of Kid Loki, it's a long story, I don't even understand it, Hawkeye, Wiccan, who's this fool? Someone comment down below and let me know who this is, because I'm too lazy to look in the book. I don't know. Clearly he didn't have much of an impact on me. Hulkling, and then my wife, Miss America. One of the reasons that I picked it for this prompt is not only because of the team aspect, but also because it deals with teens trying to solve a mystery that adults are ignoring, which is a crucial element of Fantasy High Season 1. Next is the Craft Sequence by Max Gladstone. This series is really cool because it is published out of chronological order, and you're supposed to read it out of chronological order. Now, the Craft Sequence works better as adult fantasy, but I picked it for this prompt because Fantasy High is a really unique series in that it combines very standard high fantasy tropes with a YA high school drama, which you don't get to see a lot. I've kind of been waiting my whole life, I thought I was going to have to write it myself, to see a series where orcs and dwarves are all working in offices. I really love that concept, and I think that the Craft Sequence comes the closest to doing that in a fantasy series. It is a extremely well-built world where lawyers and accountants and other office people are just as like glamorous and exciting and fantastical as your kind of typical adventurers. But he handles like fantasy bureaucracy in a way that no one else does, and I thought I would just mention it here even though it's not comparable for the age range, just because it's such a unique concept that I've really only seen done in the Craft Sequence. And my last comp title for Fantasy High is Steel Crow Saga by Paul Kruger. I included this one because it is a diverse, multiple POV series, although I think it comps better for Season 2 of Fantasy High sophomore year because it is more of a quest story. But in actuality, it's more about the effects of colonialism and making reparations after a colonizing war. It's very similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender and Pokemon, if that floats your boat. But there are 4 main characters, and they're all from different countries in a land that has recently recovered from a war. A lot of hard-hitting concepts talking about colonialism and war and forgiveness on a grand scale. If you want a diverse multiple POV series, you can't go wrong with Steel Crow Saga. Sorry, I said series. I do believe that's standalone. Next is The Unsleeping City. This is an urban fantasy D&D set in New York City in a way that didn't gel with me as much just because I'm not much of an urban fantasy fan, but I found plenty of titles that I thought were comparable. The Unsleeping City has some truly amazing character concepts where Kingston Brown from Uptown, one of my favorite characters ever, is a black nurse who works in New York. He is a cleric, but his god is the city. And it's such a fascinating concept, the way that he is so loyal to the city and the city in turn blesses him. There's also a paladin whose deity is civic responsibility. He's a firefighter. And then a trans wild magic sorcerer. I can't list them all, but a really fun group of characters. If you liked Unsleeping City, you would definitely like The City Born Great by N.K. Jemisin. It is astounding to me that these two things came out at the same time, because if there had been any gap of years apart between the two of them, I would definitely say that one of them influenced the other. The City Born Great, like The Unsleeping City, has a cast of 6 characters living in New York who all have an element of magic to them. In the case of The City Born Great, 6 people, well, 5 are chosen as the avatars of the different boroughs of New York City, and then 1 is the avatar of the city overall. This is more of a getting the team together book, so I thought the pacing, it wasn't bad, it just wasn't what I expected. It moved kind of slower than I expected it to, but it was still really good and got into some of those hard-hitting concepts that The Unsleeping City touches on, like gentrification and white supremacy, and Lovecraftian horrors as a metaphor for those big overarching concepts. Truly, like, when you read The City Born Great and watch An Unsleeping City, I think you two will also see the resemblance immediately. They are so similar to each other both in terms of people embodying the city and also the themes that they both deal with, so definitely check that out. Next comp title is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Not a lot of people know this because they're always surprised when they figure it out, as I was, that the main character is a gay black man. There isn't art of the characters on the cover, so I don't think that plane is being very rude. I don't think it gets hyped as much, but Zachary Ezra Rollins is gay and black. He's the main character. This does not have the multiple POVs as much. It's a very weird kind of like conceptual book, kind of like The Night Circus. It combines a lot of storylines. At its base, it's about a young man, Zachary, who gets swept into this magical society. It really resembles the Gramercy Occult Society in The Unsleeping City, and then it has a magical underground library and also deals with the magic of New York. It's a very whimsical title. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but I still think that it's a great comp title. And finally is the Diviners series by Libba Bray. The fourth book, The Cave Crows, just came out, and I'm on hold for it at the library. I was struggling whether to put this in Fantasy High or The Unsleeping City because of the age, but I eventually settled on Unsleeping City because it takes place in New York and deals with people with magical powers, and also talks about, again, gentrification and white supremacy. The Diviners is about a group of young New York-based teens in the 1920s who all figure out, well, some of them figure out that they have magical powers. There's a lot of main characters in this book. It is also very diverse in terms of race and sexuality. Just a group of characters that you really come to love. Oh god, Lan and Henry, my favorite friendship. I wish that there were more like helpful adult figures in this book, because I think that one thing that, this is going back to Fantasy High, but one thing that Fantasy High does really well is having a lot of supportive adult figures and the parents of the children being really important in their lives. Anyway, this is a really, really good series. It has elements of horror to it. It also teaches you a lot about American history and how it's, as James Baldwin says, way more diverse than anyone realizes. And the final series of Dimension 20 that I'm going to be talking about is the current ongoing show, which is A Crown of Candy, one of my favorite genres, political fantasy. It's often described as Candyland Game of Thrones, so I'm not even going to bother recommending Game of Thrones, one, because I haven't read it, and two, because it's just obvious. So A Crown of Candy is a very, very tense and high-stakes political fantasy where everyone is made of food. So there are 6 kingdoms, and each one is based on a different part of the food pyramid. So the main characters are all from Candia, and they're all made of candy. And that's about the lightheartedest part of the show. I've cried many times watching this show. I mean, Brennan Lee Mulligan just is doing more and more fantastic things every show. The way his mind works is something that I think we all DMs, we can all learn from him. But also the players really bring something incredible to it. My roommate and I were talking last night about good D&D shows, and he says that a lot of shows can be saved by a mediocre DM but a great cast, or a great DM and a mediocre cast. Dimension 20 is one of the rare shows where it has a great DM and a great cast. I know I keep talking about how good it is, but I really can't stress enough how incredible this show is, and I mean, A Crown of Candy, we'll have to see how I feel about it when the entire show is concluded, but it is really doing something incredible, and God, it's so creative. I just can't recommend it enough. But I will talk about some of my favorite political fantasies, some of which will come as no surprise to longtime viewers of this channel. First is, of course, perennial favorite, The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. I will never, ever get tired of this book. I could honestly listen to it like once a month and would still get a kick out of it every time. But it stars Maya, the 4th and unloved son of the Emperor of the Elflands. He is half goblin, and when his father and half-brothers are killed in an airship crash, he is miraculously made emperor in a move that no one ever saw coming, and has to deal with both his court and also personal relationships that arise. He is such a good example of non-toxic masculinity because he had such a suppressed and abusive upbringing. He's just such a gentle, sweet, and genuine person, and you are really rooting for him the whole time. There is a lot of intrigue, not as much action and cool, fun action set pieces as there are in A Crown of Candy. Much more of that, like, intrigue and court politics and just a lot of talking and manners in a way that the current season is kind of diverging away from. But the first few episodes of A Crown of Candy, I would say, are very comparable to The Goblin Emperor. But if you are enjoying A Crown of Candy and you want to seek out more political fantasy, oh my god, you have to start with The Goblin Emperor. It's so, so good. Next is another one of my favorites. I really need to reread this because I just love it so much, but it's The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. A Curse of Chalion is what would happen if Theo was the main character of a book. So Theo is the head of the guard and a knight in A Crown of Candy, just incredibly loyal to the royal family, much like Lupe de Casarel, who's the main character of The Curse of Chalion. Hot damn, this book is so, so good. It had so many good plot twists and turns and just incredible characters and a really, really fantastic religion. And if you really love loyal characters, you are going to love this book. And last is The Queen's Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. The Thief is much more of a fetch quest than the other books in the series turn out to be. The other ones are much more politically aligned. I actually started this series with The King of Atolia, which I think is the most political out of all of the books. I don't know if I would even qualify it as a fantasy. It's more like a secondary world historical fiction in a world that's a lot like ancient Greece, except for there are firearms. The middle three books in the series are very politically bent, and if you like the antics of Princess Ruby and Jet, then you are going to love Eugenides, the main character of this series. He is the Thief of Eris, which is his official title. He's sort of a spy and cat burglar who cons his way into becoming the king of a neighboring country and then sort of the king of all the countries in the area, sort of on accident, but also on purpose, because he can be very ruthless. It is YA, but not written in kind of the mid to late teens YA style. The series was started in the 90s and still hasn't finished. We don't know when the next book is coming out, but Megan, take your time, please. So it is, I would say, much more adult, not in the terms of subject matter necessarily, but just because it gets into so much of the politics and also the hard decisions that the characters have to make. It's not really like gory, or it is not sexually explicit at all, but it is very like politically savvy. But I really, really love this series. Books 1 and 5 are much more about the quest elements of A Crown of Candy, just like the very fun, oh, we're traveling across the country, have to find somewhere to spend the night, what are we gonna eat, which was like bread and butter to me growing up. The series is a great combo of both quests and political intrigue. So if you are someone who is interested in these books and would like to watch a D&D show that tackles these themes, please check out Dimension 20. If you're a fan of Dimension 20 who is looking for books to fill that fantasy high-shaped hole in your heart, please check out these books. Thank you all for taking the time to watch this video, and please remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more content by this non-binary creator.